There are many conversations we've had right here on NewsX, because an important national service needs to be performed. A large part of India's history, political, cultural, religious, theosophical, is extant in the south of India. Last January, we ran a 20-part campaign series talking about the temples of South India and how they were under threat and how we needed to save them. The Save Indian Temples campaign, you can find it again today on YouTube. We've been talking about the excavations regularly, month on month, that have been taken place in Kiladi. I've been working on my pronunciation, in fact, of Kiladi. I'm hoping I'm getting better as time progresses. For the fundamental reason that many things that people in South India feel are true, that their contribution to history and culture in this subcontinent or this great country of India often gets overlooked. I wish that I was taught a lot more about the history of South India, of all the great empires, as we learnt of the Mughals and the British Raj when we were in school, but we weren't. It's a passing mention. If you look at the archaeological findings that are predating known civilization, the Tamil language, which finds its roots as one of, if not one of the oldest languages in the world, this gets missed, and it is important it is given space in the mainstream here in India. There are lots of debates that we can have on 2-language policy or 3-language policy or 5-language or my choice or your choice or my culture or your culture, which is fine in a diverse country like India. They will happen. But we can't back away, shy away, or bald-facedly deny a bias that needs to be corrected. A Narendra Modi, who represents a party called the BJP, which and Atal Bihari Vajpayee in Parliament once very famously rebutted the Hindi belt concept. Over the past years, he might have done it for political reasons, but for other reasons as well, has gone down to Mahabalipuram to highlight the history there, has spoken about the Tamil language not once but several times, about Tamil pride and Tamil culture. It is entering the mainstream national political narrative. It must enter the mainstream media space, which is what we are trying to do here. And we need to apply correctives. Now, a left member of parliament has raised objections to a cultural committee that has been put together at the center to look at various historical aspects of India. The objection is that it does not have enough representation from the south of India. It does not, therefore, set the premise of having a culturally diverse representation. And of course, there's an objection about having more women on that particular panel. It's an issue that was raised by the DMK. It's now been raised by the left party, but it's an issue close to the heart of many people across identity and faith and political affiliations in the south of India, which is why it's an important prime time national conversation. Of all those that are happening right now, this is perhaps meriting equal importance. So let's have it. Joining us on the broadcast, let me rope in Mr. PKD Nambiar. Joining us, I also have with us Suman C. Raman, political analyst, Anurag Naidu joining us, and Dr. Fuad Aleem, CPM leader and former member of parliament. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Nambiar, if I can begin with you. To get the proper appreciation for history in general in India is very, very difficult. We are still serving the miasma of Macaulay's Minute. We know more about British India and UK history than we do about our own. It's a problem that needs to be corrected. Within that, there is an even deeper problem of a north bias in studying the Mughal Empire and British Raj. The British Raj might have happened even in Madras, but we study more about what happened in Delhi. How do we correct this, sir?
Rishabh, such a wonderful topic you have taken out. It's not because of what CPIM has attacked on this topic, but this is a topic which needs to be discussed because you and me have studied a lot of history in our schools, but which today we feel that it was more of like a cheating on us. The leftist thought process historians have created a history which was suiting more than a fact, more close to their ideologically aligned written history. That is something which has been served to this country by the leftist thought process, so-called scholars and the historians, to you and me and my kids even today studying. So there is a large amount of distorted history has been given it to us, and wherein we have been given a history where the Mughals are the heroes of this country, whereas a Padashi Raja who must have the first Indian king who fought against the Britishers and died on his own, telling the world that yes, I will not die by a foreigner, by himself. Those histories have been just put under the carpet by these so-called left historians.
Okay. So when we talk about PKD Nambiar, here's my problem. I'm defining the problem and I need all of you fine people to help me find a solution. When we talk about Indian history, we talk about British Raj, North-centric. Okay, we talk about the mutiny, North-centric. We talk about before that the Mughal Raj, North-centric. Before that the Sultanates, North-centric. Okay, and if we talk ancient history, then of course it's Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, or if you want to discuss Aryan invasion or not invasion, depending on what you believe, Saraswati civilization, Indic civilization, Indus Valley civilization, North-centric. We don't talk as much as we need to about the Chola Empire, about the grand empires that I've been talking about now that went up all the way to what is now the South China Sea, which was once called the Sea of Champa. I was interviewing one of the ambassadors from Southeast Asia just a few weeks ago. He's a third generation Indian, of course, living in a different country from Thailand, who has roots in South India. His family was from there. The historical relationship were South Indian empires that were great empires that went all across Southeast Asia, but we don't talk about them, let alone study them. This is the corrective, that if you imagine the history of India in your mind space, you're thinking, okay, right now 47, before that British, before that Mughal, before that Delhi Sultanate, and ancient history, Indus civilization. Where do the Cholas and the Champas all figure in this?
Now, may I just one more add? The southern, if you really look at the history of south of India, as you rightly mentioned, Cheras, Cholas, 5,000, almost 5,000 years of real history, starting from to the Mushiga Vams. All these have been just not been placed because there is a lot of heroism, there is a lot of Hindu ideology and too much to do with the Indians, the typical the Indian gods and goddesses, etc. You will be able to find it across Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, in almost every part of south of India. Indian culture, architecture, everything is visible. Whereas what this the historians, so-called historians, left historians have done, they have made Tipu Sultan, who have demolished large number of Indian temples, butchered large number of Hindus across South India. They have made him as a hero. So there is a huge amount of...
No, I'm open to having disagreements on who is the hero and villain, okay, and that's fine in this country. But to ignore all of it in entirety, that's the crime. So I'm sure maybe a Fawad Aleem disagrees on who the hero and villains of Indian history are, but ignoring it is the problem. Okay, so let me get in Anurag Naidu before I get in Fawad Aleem. Anurag Naidu, there is a problem. And the reason we spend so much time on NewsX is because we have a responsibility in the mainstream media that if you know there is a problem, at least try to fix it. So we've been I've run out of how many conversations I've had on Kiladi, about Tamil culture, about the temples in Tamil Nadu, that need rehabilitation. These are important things about how South Indian civilization extended into Vietnam, into Cambodia, Laos, because these conversations need to happen in the mainstream. What has gone wrong and how do we now fix it, whether it's through a cultural committee or otherwise?
Rishabh, in fact, I should appreciate you, Rishabh, at the outset, because I've been on the debates with you before on the Tamil culture and you have taken this point very audaciously. Rishabh, one important point that I have when I speak to activists, particularly the farm activists, and I've often been taking this example, one of the leading activists happened to tell me the only reason that all the farmers of India could not get united is because of the language barriers, and there is not a unified language which all of them do not understand. Then obviously what happens, you go to Delhi, you go to Jantar Mantar, you'll see the farmers from Punjab, you'll see the farmers from UP, but you're missing the farmers from Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka in action, because they really don't want to go to Delhi. There is a cultural barrier, there's a language barrier that they feel. But I think beyond all of that, there was a Hindi debate that also kicked in. There is a very subtle notion, Rishabh, that language is an important aspect which we need to fix in order to create a unified, resemblance across all the culture, because language is the first step towards understanding each other's culture. So I think at the core, language is important. And also, Rishabh, if I remember very well, there was one more debate on Tamil culture that you did some time ago, and I remember very well. It was a week later, the Prime Minister made a speech in the United Nations, the famous speech where he quoted Tamil as one of the oldest cultures and civilizations in the world. And none other than our own Prime Minister has been the forefront ambassador for Tamil culture, and it is a very renowned fact, and everybody will accept, at least in India, that Tamil is our oldest culture. But what makes us, because I've also lived in North India, Rishabh, I've grown in Central India, being from South India, I see that North Indians have not explored Tamil or Tamil Nadu or Kerala or Andhra to that extent. And that is the main reason again.
And a lot more of that needs to be done. You're bang on there. And it's only when it's a see it to believe it. Okay. The sad reality also is that most of North India's ancient structures were destroyed. So if you really want to see things that are 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 year old, you have to go to the south of India, and these places are still in use. This is not some archaeological dig alone, they're still in use. Now let me get Fuad Aleem. Fuad Aleem, one of your colleagues has raised a pertinent point. I know it's shared by the DMK, and it is of political importance and also of cultural importance. Let me ask the cultural question first, sir. Giving pride of place to South Indian culture, tradition and history in the larger mainstream narrative of the subcontinent, where have we gone wrong, and how do we correct it?
Well, the first thing, Rishabh, we have to understand regarding this committee is that this committee, its constitution is being questioned by us. Now, this committee has not functioned, so we do not know where it is going to focus on, but we do know that the government of India at this point of time has a very narrow perspective as to how diverse our history is, which is why this committee has been constructed so. If you look, there is nobody from South India. There is nobody from the northeastern part of India. There are no Dalits in the committee. There is no tribal representation. There are 0 women on this committee, and the minorities have been excluded from this committee. So you've got this committee which is quite big. It's a 16-member committee. And in 16 members, the government of India did not find adequate space to ensure that the diversity of India, not only in terms of North Indian women, if you exclude a woman from becoming a member of the committee, you are excluding the North Indian women also from their due representation in this context of culture. This entire context of culture, you've got very, very important women perspectives that at this point of time in India need to be explored. So that point of view is not going to be represented in this committee. So who are members? If you look at the membership of this committee, then you will see that there is a very interesting member of this committee. His name is Mr. M.R. Sharma. He is the chairman of Sanmark, World Brahmin Federation. Now, it's very clear that when you have allowed space for such people to be included into the committee, then you have a political agenda.
No, explain. I mean, he's not here to defend himself, but what is your accusation?
Which has a very strong religious bias, and it falls into the construct of the RSS hegemony that is coming
So like I said, I want to discuss the culture of it before I go into the politics of it, but often they are intertwined. So let me now address this head on. There is a logical argument to make that minority representation of all. There is a 50% minority in this country also that is called women that requires representation. It's an obvious argument to make, because another thing that we overlook, even though we have heroines of Indian past, is the role that women have played in Indian history. There's a very logical argument to be made that people from the Northeast, people from South India need inclusion. And without a doubt, the constitution of this committee requires overlook. But then to say that if somebody happens to be Hindu, that's wrong. If he happens to be a Brahmin, that's wrong. Balance
No,
is
what
everything.
I'm saying is,
Okay.
What I'm saying is that when you have a member that the government is accommodating, then the government definitely has a reason for accommodating this perspective in it, because they did not make the Dalit organization representative or member of this committee. They did not make the other backward caste representative of this. They didn't make the Kshatriya or the Shudra or the other caste members here. They have allowed space for the Brahmins to come into the
I am going to be appreciable on any effort. Any effort
searching for balance,
that looks,
then you have to
I think it's very reasonable to argue for
balance.
balance. I think that's the reasonable part of your argument, sir, and I second it because it's a reasonable argument. But any effort to promote Indian culture and investigate Indian culture, which we have voluminously failed to do for so many decades. I can tell you what Marcus Tullius Cicero had for breakfast the day he was killed. I can't tell you about vast swathes of Indian history. We can't even agree on the dates of the epics. We don't know which all kingdoms in South India controlled which all areas in Southeast Asia, even though we can see their structures and see the shivlings popping out of the ground in Vietnam. This requires a corrective, balanced approach. Anurag Naidu, balanced approach. In a very complicatedly diverse country like ours, you will never be able to create a perfectly balanced committee. How do we at least try to take this one step further? Anurag.
Rishabh, I would just like to make a quick rebuttal to the member who is supporting the CPIM's claim. They're trying to bring religionism. Rishabh, honestly, I have gone through the committee members, and it is not where you come from, which region you belong to, which religion you follow. It is more about whether that committee and the appointees are legitimate. They are the office bearers of Archaeological Survey of India. They are the office bearers of Sanskrit University, Culture University, Vice Chancellor. They are relevant people to the domain. Instead of having a relevant people of the domain, what CPIM is suggesting is you probably have a political person representing a religion or B culture.
I think it's reasonable to say that in the vast population of India, you will find experts out of all sorts of ethnic groups, out of all sorts of groups, regional or religious or otherwise. So I don't think that's impossible. But we've never tried this before, so it's going to be a problem. I'm accepting that. What I'm trying to say is, what is the next step forward? How do we rationalize this one step forward?
Rishabh, what should matter is content more than just names. Maybe somebody like you or me sitting in Delhi might have better knowledge of understanding of the Tamil culture by the literature and the things that we read or the things that we explore. It's a very high possibility. It's not that somebody living in Tamil. I have friends in Tamil who probably do not know much about the Tamil culture. So it doesn't mean that you pick somebody from Tamil, they would naturally understand more about the place.
Okay, but you need bona fide people who are at least experts on a particular field that relates to Tamil culture, to Malayalam culture, to Kannadiga culture, the histories thereof, Northeast, extreme north, history of Jammu and Kashmir is equally important, as is of Maharashtra and of Bengal. All have fascinating histories, and all of them are very, very long histories that go back. If you want to go to the Paraganas were named by, Sher Shah Suri. That's where the name comes from. PKD Nambiar, in attempting this balance, at least somebody is trying to recognize and appreciate the problem. Okay? The problem was not enough was being done on this. What was being done of this only gave us a history of modern day India, which was colored. I don't want to take issue with people who were trying to do an honest job as historians, but history I was taught was colored. At least the problem solving is happening. Now, how do we take it one step forward? What's the next obvious step?
Rishabh, 16-member committee. I went through the entire list of those committee, and I don't think I did not even look at, I'm a person from Kerala. I never looked at from the name that is there a Nayar or a Nambiar or a Menon or somebody else is there in that list. What mattered to me is that, yes, at least if not me, my kids will be able to learn and understand the history, which is the true history of India. This is precisely, Rishabh, you are trying to tell the world that, yes, we have a history, which is a colored history, which we have been presented. Now, at least we may get a scientific, archaeologically proved history is going to be present to us. One. Number two, just quick rebuttal to Mr. Ali. It's really hard to hear from a communist leader saying that why we don't have a person from different religion, different places, etc., etc. What are we talking about? You and your party is the one which always talk about only single humanism and only one religion, one kind of
No,
sect.
the allegation he's making, Mr. Halim, the allegation he's making is that this is an RSS attempt at delivering another colored history of India, which is religious specific, Sanskrit specific. Now, that's the allegation. To ensure that no such issue remains hovering over this, how do we solve it?
RSS has formed in this country in 1925. Sanskrit has got a history of much before. As you rightly said in the beginning, the Ramayanas and the Puranas and the Vedas, we still don't know when they have all come into this world for us. We wanted to know that. So why do we need to even look at everything from the prism of that secular, some of these glamorous words for the politicians to use? We need to have people, the ladies should be there, the women should be there. May I ask Mr. Ali one particular question? When the earlier ICHR was formed during the older times, even during the Nehruvian time onwards, the historians like Romila Thapar and etc. has clearly said that there is nothing called wherein a Muslim regional director of Archaeological Survey of India said that Babri Masjid was built
Okay, I don't want to get into all of this because it'll be an unending debate. Okay, but I'll accept the larger premise. I'm trying to make a larger premise here. Let me try that. Mr. Fuad Halim, I am a creature of Macaulay's minute. I am embarrassed to say that I speak the English language better than I speak my native tongue. My parents would be happier if I spoke a bit of Punjabi. I can understand it, but I don't speak it very well. Hindi, I can manage with it, but you know, I won't be doing a PhD thesis in Hindi. There is a realization that I have to have that just because a person does not speak very good English doesn't mean that they are less educated or know less about this country than I do. Similarly, if a person represents Sanskrit or a Brahmin point of view, why should we reject all these point of views in getting a fair understanding of India?
Well, my contention was not to reject different views. My contention was to be inclusive of all the views, which then goes in to give us an entire composite idea of our culture, which the RSS and the BJP have a problem with. You see, prior to the RSS attempt to rewrite history, we have always had a very composite and secular idea. And as the Nambiar very clearly expresses the intention that he is not interested in this composite vertical idea. So the deficiency in actually concluding a composite idea and an inclusive idea of all our cultural streams and ethos begins with the formation of the committee, where you exclude people who actually have that knowledge domain.
The premise is going
so
from
you
here.
don't have that knowledge domain.
I'm going to give you a premise, sir, and you can agree.
You don't have the the desire to even reflect a modicum of balance in while forming the committee.
Okay, no, I completely empathize and agree with that. We have to relook at composition because a composition at the very preface supposes what the work the committee will do. It might be unfair. There might be well-meaning people. I might say that I want to represent and speak about issues in the South very often, but it would be more useful for a composition of having a panel with actual voices from the South. No point having 5 well-meaning Northerners discussing South Indian issues. In the same way, Mr. Fuad Halim, the counter also exists. When you say that our history that has been taught to us thus far was a composite history, is it not true that it ignored a large part of what we have just discussed?
Well, you have to understand that the studies in history is an evolving process. The British slant to study our history was born out of their desire to rule us. And we in free India have opened up newer avenues of looking at history, and those studies need to proceed. Unfortunately, the British attitude is going to be revisited through this Bharatiya Janata Party, effort by forming this committee to look at it in a very slanted way, so that people of India reduce their understanding of our diversity to a system whereby a political party benefits. That's a clear linkage between what
we don't have a
ideas
unitary history in this country.
idea,
Unlike
so that
Anurag Naidu, I'm out of time, sir.
Party.
Okay, Anurag Naidu, let me present the problem to people watching this broadcast. Studying Indian history is not like studying British history. In Britain, the House of Windsor, Windsor Castle has been the seat for 1000 years. Okay. It's a small place. If you try to study European history as the context of one country, Those will be the complexities and the complications you'll have to deal with in studying Indian history. The second problem is most of Indian history, its text, its archaeology, its architecture has been destroyed, not once but in several ways. It has been repeatedly destroyed. Today we are in a position where we honestly can't find a lot of the archaeology, even though texts tell us they exist. Where we can find the archaeology, we cannot find the text. It's not like Indians didn't know how to read and write. We have some of the most ancient languages in the world. Within this is the modern context of a slant that was given to our history by people who chose to rule us. Anurag Naidu, how do we, or how does the government of the day at the national level earn the trust of its peoples that it is not giving the slant?
I think, Rishabh, you made a very well point, but Indian history has been really vocal in terms of their display of culture. If you go to the temples, if you go to the caves, there's still scripture, scripts written on the walls and on the walls of the temple and the pillars of the temple and so on and so forth. And every deity in the temple, see how beautifully we are stitched, Rishabh. Hinduism, if you take Hinduism, which is in majoritarian in India, Hinduism doesn't worship God, they worship deity. So every deity has its own unique nature. And that nature is derived from the place or the surrounding or the culture that the deity has been worshipped with. Now, obviously,
okay, so how do we make the answer I'm looking for, Anurag, is how do we make the balance between replacing a Mughal British version of North Indian history as Indian history with a more geographically cohesive and inclusive version that makes space but does not become a Hindu history of India?
We have to redo the textbooks of history. We have been reading the content that has been there in the textbooks that our children or maybe we have been studying when we were kids, and that was more derived from the government of the day. Right now, it has a great influence of what the government wanted to be there in the textbooks, and this is the time that you should put the reality back into the textbook.
Now here's I'm out of time. So here's the premise. I think there is consensus from the diverse opinion you've just heard that something needs to be done. There is disagreement on the motivation, there is disagreement on the process, and there is disagreement on the composition of a committee. Some of it should reasonably be addressed and looked upon, but after a point, there will be controversy over everything that needs to be done. What there can be no controversy or disagreement about is that if there is a public interest, a public will, a public clamor for a better understanding of who we are and where we come from, it will happen. If there is disinterest, it will not happen. We are in the cusp of the Chinese telling us that they have a grand history. There is no Harappa and Mohenjo-daro in China, guys. Doesn't exist. Buddhism came from India. The Chinese are co-opting it. They are trying to claim the South China Sea, which was once called the Sea of Champa, was part of a South Indian empire. You see the Ramayana being performed all the way in Indonesia, which is a Muslim majority country, in Laos, in Cambodia. The sitting king of Thailand is called King Rama X. You land in Bangkok, you land at the Swarnabhumi airport, which is Sanskrit. A lot of the interpretations of cultural history in Southeast Asia come from the Tamil language and Tamil roots. This is a realization of the wonder that was India, to borrow A.L. Basham, that we now need in the country, which is why we're spending time on it. I'm hoping you do too.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.